This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today on the Great North Wrestling podcast, we have a gentleman who runs Canadian Wrestling Elite, which is the largest professional wrestling touring company in Canada, and possibly even larger than any touring company in the US, because I don't know of any American companies doing 30-plus day tours. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his company today, about the infamous stuff that happened with Brutus Beefcake last year, as well as an upcoming event he has happening at the Jim Durrell Center December the 6th, I believe,
Yes,
in
sir.
Ottawa, Canada. Their debut in Ottawa. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm getting excited, getting ready to hit the road tomorrow to Newfoundland and then back to Manitoba to get ready for that big 31-day tour you mentioned.
Yes, and you're bringing in Juventud Guerrera for that, who was one of the big stars of WCW, and I believe Jimmy Jacobs from Ring of Honor too. So that's a pretty good commitment from those guys to go at it for 30 days in a row.
Yeah, most definitely. And then we also have Vinny Marseglia from the Kingdom from Ring of Honor, who's the current CWE champion as well as Bob Evans and Tim Hughes from Ring of Honor. So it's a pretty stacked card. We're really excited to do it. And for the last few tours, we've been running a lot of legends, so to speak. As you mentioned, Brutus Beefcake. For the last tour or two, we've been going to more in-ring competitors like Juventud Guerrero. So it's been a nice change-up and nice present for the Canadian wrestling fans.
Yeah, so I understand you've run as far as BC to the West Coast, and now you're into Ontario, going all the way to Ottawa, which is almost at the Quebec border. What are some of the main towns that you're hitting on this tour, and where can people find more information about it?
Well, the tour is going to span Vancouver or Richmond, which is just outside Vancouver, all the way through Ottawa. So we start in Winnipeg. We take the Highway 16 across northern Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, then BC. Then we dip down, do Vancouver, and then we come across on Highway 1 and then hit up Calgary, Regina, Winnipeg, Thunder Bay, and then end up going east. So we're hitting a lot of the major markets in every one of those provinces. And ticket information can be found at CWEtickets.com or on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at CWE Canada.
And I understand, I mean, it's very dangerous driving to these some of these towns. You mentioned Thunder Bay. That's literally out in the woods, but you go to places even more secluded than that. I know you were in a car accident a few years ago. What are some of the dangers you've encountered? I'm sure lots of moose and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, the accident was only a few months ago. It was on the last tour we did, and it was in Ontario. We were going from Sudbury to Kirkland Lake, and the driver of my vehicle spun out of control on some slippery conditions. We spun out and flipped a few times, ended up upside down in a ditch, and that ditch submerged with water very quickly. And I was trapped in my seatbelt and drowning, and went unconscious, and had to have somebody on the side of the road, thank God, stop and cut the seatbelt out and pull me out, or I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So it is very dangerous, and that was in May. And now we're going to be doing the tour again and doing it in November, December, going through the BC mountains, which is a very dangerous time of year to be traveling, and then of course back through northwestern Ontario at the beginning of December, which isn't very pretty of a ride either.
And what happened with this Brutus Beefcake thing? I guess you did half of your tour, but then he disappeared for the last few events despite you paying him.
Yeah, so that would have been about a year ago. That was our spring tour, our fall tour of last year. And Brutus, he was scheduled for, I believe, 32 dates we had, and he made 28 of them. And we had an arrangement and agreement put in place prior to him coming to the tour. And then a few days prior, him and his wife hit me up and pretty much held me up for money before they'd get on a plane and come. So right away, I knew we were going to have some trouble before he got here. Luckily, we were able to pull those finances together and make that happen. So he was always paid 4 shows in advance, where everyone's usually paid nightly on these tours, and has always been paid that way for 10 years of doing these without any issue. But he asked for that money up front, and once he got here, he got very difficult to deal with on a regular basis, and made things very difficult for us doing television with sponsors. Even just meeting fans just wasn't very pleasant and easy to deal with, and very quickly became a headache on a daily basis. And it kind of came to a head. And then when he had 4 shows left, right before we were about to do that Ontario loop, he collected his he's paid up for the rest of the tour with 4 dates left to go. And he left in the middle of the night, like a thief in the night, got on the plane and left. And we didn't find out till a couple hours before the event the next day, when we realized his ride didn't have him in the vehicle.
We had an issue with him actually the last time we used him in Ottawa. Coincidentally, I had a certified money order from a bank, like stamped, that I usually pay my stars with so we can claim it on our taxes. But he refused to accept the money order, and the show was on a Saturday. So we're scrambling around on a Saturday night to find a bank that's going to give us American money to pay him. So, yeah, I don't think we'll be using him again in the future, but good for him that he got into the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's irony in the wrestling business for you, because he got inducted or announced for that induction just a few months after this all blew up on the internet, of him doing that with us, and he's done it with you. And sadly, I'd known he'd done it with promoters before, but we've also had talent up that don't necessarily have the best reputation, that were absolutely perfect to deal with once they got here. We had no issue with, so we figured, there's always two sides to every story. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And once he gets up here and he sees it's a group of the boys sitting the road every day, it's not a marked promoter, maybe he'll be fine. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And then when we announced our story, much like you just did, dozens of other promoters came out of the woodwork and shared similar stories. And because of that, I haven't seen his name pop up all that too often. So hopefully that karma's caught up to him a little bit.
Yeah, and he's also a very cranky guy to deal with. I had to deal with that. He has temper tantrums a lot.
Yeah, and it was just it was crazy, because I'd pick him up, say, at 9 a.m. to go do something. He'd be completely pleasant, and then a half hour without anything changing, it'd just be like a snap of a finger, and you'd get somebody completely different. And I'm not sure if that's the old age, or the concussions over the years, because I know that could be effective of people's mood and their mood disorders. But yeah, you'd be dealing with a different guy from 20 minutes prior to 20 minutes after, and it was absolutely mind-boggling. And I know a lot of people had to deal with that, whether it be, like I said, fans, or even when we go to do TV interviews and things of that nature, he would just be miserable, and that'd be on air, never mind to them off camera, which was a little bit worse even. So it was just really unfortunate when you bring somebody up and you invest that kind of money in them to try to enhance your brand and promote your product for you. And then, of course, the fans are the ones that are looking forward to seeing them the most. So when they're let down by that experience, not only they disappointed, it falls back on the promotion as well, that we have to deal with that backlash moving forward as we continue to promote events and bring stars in.
And for you yourself, you've had WWE tryouts. I haven't actually seen too many of your matches, but you look like Arn Anderson kind of when you go out there, and you have a similar build to what he used to have when he was in his prime. Want to just tell us about your style and some of the legends you've wrestled? I know you've wrestled tons of big names.
Yeah, definitely, and that's. I started to get that Arn compliment the more I started to grow out the beard and the chest hair. So one of the matches I actually did for WWE, I did a dark match against Jack Swagger prior to a SmackDown taping. They actually kind of ribbed me and Arn, because I had similar gear to Arn done. So I was Arn Anderson Jr. for that dark match while he was still there at the time. But when you talk about my style, I would say and you probably see it by just watching me wrestle, I'm a big fan of 80s professional wrestling and 90s professional wrestling. That's what I grew up on. That's the wrestling I love. And that's the style of wrestling I like to try to keep alive, as it's slowly slipping through the cracks and we're not seeing too much of it anymore. And as much as people like to say, the time change and the business changes, I am a firm believer the wheel doesn't need to be recreated. It still works. And if you know how to do that style effectively, you can still get the desired response from an audience, even more so than today's style of professional wrestling, more than ever before. But I think a lot of people don't like to take the time and the effort to learn the craft and the psychology that comes with that storytelling of the 80s and 90s style of professional wrestling. And it's a little more satisfying to get that instant gratification of doing a high spot.
I keep hearing that the business is evolving, but from what I understand, the current television products have less viewers than they've had in decades. So I do believe that there's more fans of the original 80s and 90s style that you're talking about. Just maybe the fans watching the current product today like what there is today, but there's just certainly not as many of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think there still is a very large portion of fan that still likes that style of professional wrestling, and you see it when we go and do these tours across Canada, because that style still is very prevalent and still works magically in all these places. I think it's a false sense of belief that this modern style is more popular, or it's the right style of wrestling, because it's the vocal minority on the internet, where maybe the fans of the 80s style of professional wrestling are a little bit of an older fan, or they're maybe not on the internet and being as vocal and passionate as today's wrestling fans are. So I'm not discrediting today's style of professional wrestling. I think there's still a place for it, and it's obviously still doing business for some organizations, but to completely dismiss a completely different style and generation of wrestling as being obsolete, it doesn't fly by me.
And I have to ask you about this Lacey Evans RCMP thing, because I'm sure you've been pulled over a time or two on the road. Do you think she discussed this with the officer before recording the in character thing? Because I think if I or you were pulled over and we started recording a police officer, they wouldn't take it as lightly as he did.
At the same time, though, they get recorded so much now that his responses were very short and quick. So I don't know if she did discuss it with him because he seemed to be just trying to get in and out of there as quickly as he could, because it is so common now that they get filmed and put on the internet for not doing their job properly, or people assuming they're not doing their job properly or abusing their power. So I think with him being in the right, it was just a matter of him getting in and out and doing that. And I don't think she broke any law by being in character. If she had something to hide in the vehicle, then maybe she wouldn't have been talking that way. But with it just being a simple traffic violation, she can't really get thrown in jail for doing anything more. So I think she took an opportunity to get herself over, so to speak, and further that character and gimmick.
I don't think she broke any law by doing that either, but posting footage of someone without consent, there can be issues with that. But I don't know what the police's views are on that, so we'll let that go. And finally, you got some Great North Wrestling wrestlers appearing in Ottawa December 6th. I know you got Jeremy Prophet, the Blood Hunter, possibly a few others. You're going to be on the card, Juventud Guerrera, some of the other guys you mentioned before. What can Ottawa fans expect from CWE, who haven't heard of the product yet because you guys haven't been here?
They can expect a throwback to what professional wrestling used to be, with a blend of today's style of professional wrestling. And that's been the key to our success, is we're delivering something for everybody on these wrestling shows. We're not a one-note wrestling show, as they like to call it. You're not going to come and see high spots from opening bell to end of bell, or hardcore wrestling, or whatever the case may be. You're going to see a little bit of something for everybody. So whether you're a 40-year-old man, a 14-year-old boy, or you're a family coming out with your kids, there's going to be something and someone for everybody on this event. And from opening bell to end of bell, you're going to be taken on a ride that you're going to enjoy and see something a little bit different each and every match.
And that card is going to be posted in full on the Hannibal TV for people watching this. So that will be a lot of the Americans that subscribe to this channel's first exposure to CWE. Any plans to cross the border? I know you're based in Winnipeg, which is really close to Minnesota.
Yeah, well, we actually had a sister company by the name of Midwest Wrestling's Elite that was operating for about a year. That looks like it's going to be taking a little bit of a hiatus. So I'm going to be discussing with some people down there, hopefully keeping that thing alive through some different management. But yeah, we're definitely very hungry to keep on expanding and keep on moving forward. And when that project started a year ago, it was with the same idea, as to start the touring market we have up here down there. But obviously, being Canadian, it's a little bit more tricky. So it's got to be done through some different ownership and different people at the helm who are American citizens and able to do so. So we're definitely very, very eager to continue on doing so, because me as a performer am very active being down there on a very regular basis. So I'd like to continue to try to expand my brand down there as well.
Kenny Omega is one of the big Winnipeg stars, one of the biggest wrestling stars in the world. Maybe not in the US yet. Maybe that'll change with AEW, but definitely in Japan. Did you have any interaction with him over your career, also being from Winnipeg?
Yeah, probably most of my career, until he, really took off big in Japan and moved there for pretty much a full-time basis. He started a year or two before I did, but I got to spend some time traveling with him. When I broke into the business, we did a couple trips to the U.S. together. When he, got a look with TNA and NWA Wildside, and did his first tour in New England. And he was also my tag partner as one half of the CWE Tag Team Champion. So I got to work with him quite a few times on our tours as well. And he's somebody I've considered a friend over the years. With his big success, we don't get to keep in touch as much as we did. But he's definitely somebody I consider a friend, and somebody I've looked up to in the business due to his success and kind of carving his own path the way he has.
With him being an executive in AEW, do you think there's any chance they could give you a shot there down the line? I know they're going after the small wrestlers right now, but I could see you being in there, especially with Arn Anderson, an agent.
Yeah, I got a very good relationship with Arn. It's kind of weird. I probably developed a stronger relationship with Arn than I do with Kenny these days. But I'd like to keep my fingers crossed that if my name did come up, or if I were to submit something, that I'd get a vote of confidence from him. But maybe to my own detriment. There's been times that I've tried not to call in and pull in those favors for the amount of guys I've booked, where people are like, "Hey, man, you should probably call and ask those guys to do something for you," because I have booked a lot of guys that are in powerful positions. But maybe I'm silly for doing it. But I try not to lean on that too much. And if an opportunity comes my way, just hope that my name will be, used in a positive fashion, or I'd get a recommendation.
What about Don Callis, who's one of the executives in Impact? He's from Winnipeg too. I know his company there wasn't that successful though. Didn't he only run about a year or so with that No Holds Barred company?
Yeah, he just kind of ran some spot shows in Winnipeg, and then they had a money guy, so they ran some TVs for a short period of time. But then he kind of got out of the business shortly after that. He was the booker for Tony Candelo though for many years, so he was kind of got the guy that was kind of the gatekeeper for guys coming to Winnipeg that were from out of town. Um, I just started developing a relationship with Don. I want to say over the last 2 years or whenever it was he got into the business, because he got out of the business pretty much the same year I started. So everybody else in Winnipeg had worked with him for 15 years, and I had just missed him. I just heard different stories, good and bad, from different people, mostly, the bad being from people that didn't have a good experience with him because of where they were on the pecking order, so to speak. And I've come to learn that as I've gotten to know him. But as I've developed a relationship with him, I spoke to him briefly about Impact when he first got there. And at the time, they were hemorrhaging money, and they weren't necessarily hiring guys without a name value, so to speak, as they were trying to, build some brand equity first. So now maybe with the jump to Anthem, with Access as well, maybe some opportunities will open up that I can discuss with them.
I'm shocked they haven't done a taping in Winnipeg yet because they haven't been drawing too well. And I know in Winnipeg, you guys are a hotbed for wrestling. They would probably draw really well there and possibly use some local guys like you.
Yeah, well, I've talked to him loosely about it. Like we've brought it up in conversation about the possibility of doing it, because CWE does have a good base here, and when we do our big tour events, when they stop in Winnipeg, we're getting anywhere from 500 to 700 people, which is more than Impact is drawing on a lot of their house shows. This is mere speculation, but Don has a very good reputation in Winnipeg. Not only as being like the top wrestling guy that came from here, outside of Jericho, but after that, he got into government and had a very high position in the government here. So I don't know if it's simply a matter of maybe not wanting to mix the two worlds, or because he has such a strong reputation here, if the event doesn't go well, maybe that smears that reputation a little bit. I'm not sure what the case is, and that's just mere speculation on my part, because I think it would do well with Don if he were to come here and do it. But at the same time, there's probably some negatives to it if it doesn't go well. So I think that's probably something that's been, weighed on his mind as well.
And finally, Chris Jericho. I got to ask you about him as a Winnipeg wrestler. Ever meet
Man,
him?
yeah, I've met him. I've only met him a few times in passing when he was in town. I got to have some drinks with him at the legendary Palomino Club here in Winnipeg, and I got to talk to him about an international opportunity I had coming up. And he was a really cool dude. But I don't know him well whatsoever, or even on a personal basis. But he was always the measuring stick for us Winnipeg wrestlers, for two reasons. One, because he was really the only guy from Winnipeg to actually do anything for a long period of time. Don had his run as well, but Chris was a megastar, and Winnipeg was pretty much a dead end for everybody at the time. So for him to get out there, he was always kind of that inspiration that, hey, if Chris was able to do it, maybe there's hope for us as well. And luckily, in recent years, there has been with guys like Kenny and a few others. At the same time, too, he wasn't a very large guy. I think he was billed on TV as 225 pounds, so he was probably 20, 30 pounds less than that. So for him to be, a Winnipeg guy and not a heavyweight at a time where heavyweights dominated professional wrestling, it was kind of an inspiration and a light of hope for us guys here in Winnipeg, that hopefully if the cards fell in the right place, that guys from here can make it.
So where can people follow you guys on social media if they want to look up CWE Wrestling?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, all at CWE Canada. And then myself can be found at Hotshot Danny Duggan and all those mediums as well.
Hotshot Danny Duggan. Were you trained by Hotshot Johnny Devine, who's wrestled for me a bunch of times?
Yes, I sure was. I was originally trained by a fellow by the name of Gene Swan in Winnipeg. And a couple years into my career, Johnny was stabbed while down in TNA in Nashville. So he had to come back up to Canada and use our free health care to get that all taken care of. So he opened up a wrestling school while he was here. And I got to kind of, do his course as well. And when he went back to TNA, he, I believe, was doing the serotonin gimmick. So he was retiring the hotshot gimmick, and I had moved to Ontario where he was living. So he had passed the moniker down to myself, and here I am still using it all these years later.
Yeah, he's a good guy and definitely a good trainer. I don't know if he's still Scott D'Amore's official trainer, but he was the official trainer for Scott D'Amore's company for a while there. But any final thoughts you want to leave us about the upcoming Juices on the Loose CWE tour that's going through many different Canadian provinces?
if you haven't been out to a CWE event yet, and for whatever reason that may be, I just say give us one chance, because the reason we have built to touring tours of even over close to 40 events at times across Canada is because once we get people in the door once, we get them back again and again, and it keeps on building and it keeps on getting stronger. And with this whole wrestling boom or perceived wrestling boom, Canadian wrestling's often forgot about. The UK is hot, Japanese wrestling's hot, Lucha Libre's hot, but people are forgetting about Canadian wrestling. And I'm a firm believer we have the very best professional wrestlers in this country, and those are going to be on display on this tour. So come out and support it, and let's put Canadian wrestling on the map.